Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jessica, head of marketing at CH Consulting Group, and I am excited to bring you this fantastic discussion today with the three CEOs behind the AI Readiness Assessment. Christa Heibel from CH Consulting Group, Fred Stacy from Cloud Tech Gurus, and Eben Hall from Vertex C3. These three leaders have come together to launch something that is long overdue: a practical, honest, and strategic approach to AI readiness, grounded in real operational insight from decades of experience in CX technology and enterprise implementation. If you're considering AI or looking to improve your current AI results, this conversation is for you. So let's dive in. What inspired the creation of the AI Readiness Assessment?
So do you want me to take this one, guys?
Go for it.
Fire away.
Yeah. Well, we've seen this challenge. Artificial intelligence is not new to our space by any stretch. However, there are a lot of companies out there, a lot of point solutions being bought, customers deploying, and unfortunately not getting the return on investment that they were promised. There's a lot of noise in the market, and through Christa and Eben and myself having many conversations. Actually, Christa and I think, talked about this a couple of years ago for the first time, although we didn't really know what to call it yet. So there's a challenge in the market, and we felt like there was a significant need and a gap to fill, which is really helping organizations prepare for what's next, which is becoming really what I call an AI-enabled company. And I know, Chris, I'm sure you can probably add a little color, and Eben too.
I'm going to say market pain, right? To Fred's point of watching organizations kind of stumbling around some of this, which is not uncommon when you have new emerging technology and those early adopters and innovators, but there's really a way to do AI that doesn't need to be as painful and can have ROI and optimization benefit. And so really just putting some structure, helping organizations struggle with what we saw very similarly with CCAS, right, in the last 10 years as well, and just adopting operations to this optimized technology.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what I've seen a lot is a lot of the push or the promise to use AI without really knowing it. And so then, which I've seen over and over again in my career, is the miss on the expectation gap, right? So you thought it was going to get something, and then it didn't deliver on the promise, right? And so we're starting to hear the same thing here, and so that's really what kind of helped drive the need.
Okay, what makes this assessment different from other AI evaluations that are now on the market?
Well, I'm going to say, number one, I think we're trying to do this wrapped around just good business practices. And from that perspective, we're not just looking at tech isolated outside of current business state, financial goals and objectives, business processes, and operational requirements. So we're looking at this from a technology, from a more holistic perspective. I think that's one of the items.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of companies out there are trying to put together, quick kind of how to get my product deployed type of solutions. Here's a survey, here's a consultant, but the intent is to drive a single point solution. We're taking a completely different approach. As Christa said, it's holistic. The contact center is the tip of the spear for artificial intelligence, but you still have to include the people and the processes and then the technology. And it's not as simple as just plugging in a solution, right? It drives me crazy when I hear people say, well, our ingestion models are so great that you don't need to be AI ready. Well, look, if a company is only going to deploy a single point solution, that may be true, but we all know where this is heading. Artificial intelligence will be deployed everywhere in a company, from HR to accounting to the contact center. We just happen to be the one leading the charge. So to get ready is a much larger, much larger project. I attribute it much like digital transformation. That was a holistic approach. And many companies still haven't deployed, completely gotten cloud, deployed for, what is it? 30% of all Fortune 500 still have premise-based telephony. Wow. So, it's, this is a much broader, holistic approach, still focused on the contact center and customer experience. But we still take a whole business overview. And I know from the technical side, having operations development from Evan's team, people that have built PLLMs for companies, and then the technology stack, for bringing the three of us together kind of just, makes, in our opinion, the best and most holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. What are the biggest misconceptions about AI readiness that you're seeing?
Evan, you want?
I think what we see as one of the biggest misconceptions is that to do AI right and to actually have an impact in a positive way on the operation from an ROI or a CX perspective takes more lift than a lot of organizations believe. So the market, not only the AI technology products and companies who are very excited to be selling their wares, but also executives and the investment community got really excited about this and thought, well, we're just going to go cut like 30, 40, 50% of labor. Let's go get AI. And so it is not necessarily that simple. Maybe some applications in your organization may have quick wins like that, single use case applications, very niche platforms that fit into verticals, right? Where they're just solving one little opportunity may do that, but there's often a period of optimizing. It's not a turn on and it's where it's going to be. And I think, again, the lift on operations input into making any level of that successful is often undervalued or appreciated. And so there is a little bit more behind making it successful than most people feel.
I would agree with that.
Which has led to all the, the horror stories, right? Because there are a ton of success stories, but then there are some horror stories where AI has been rolled out and had to be pulled back. It's created more call volume in the contact center instead of deflection. It's created worse customer experience or CSAT scores. So, doing things properly, again, takes just the right planning and effort is obviously what we believe. And we've proven over and over again with all of our clients. So.
And just to continue on that same thread, the stories of, chatbots going off and hallucinating and, telling, one of the most famous ones that I think, I use a lot when I talk about it is the eating disorder hotline that the chatbots started telling people to not eat. That's not only is it bad experience, but it's also dangerous, right? And that was early on in this whole, generative conversational AI LLM world, right? So we're just like any technology, we're learning a lot. Early adopters tend to be out on the bleeding edge. The bleeding edge to cutting edge curve, though, is a lot smaller on this one. But it does not change the fact that a company still has to do all the work. So the misconceptions, there are a million around what AI is capable of today, safely and securely, and at an enterprise grade versus, what we can all do, personally playing around with ChatGPT or Grok or whatever the LLM is.
Can any of you share a real world example where AI readiness or a lack of it has impacted a company's results?
So, I just gave one. the real world of not being and not thinking through the actual, the capabilities and the guardrails and all the things that we've, so painfully learned over the last couple of years. But the positivity is, there are companies out there that are seeing, high 90, well, not high, let's say 90%, containment rates in certain verticals with a lot of training and tuning and doing it appropriately. There's a lot of companies seeing a lot of success from conversational analytics, agent assistant guidance. There are tool sets out there that, preparing and getting ready, can do it. I know, Christa, we've talked about, other use cases, that are large transitions over, a couple year periods, where companies were able to implement, starting with their CCAS, getting, up to date and, and then migrating, and bringing in the right solutions. So there's a million horror stories, as Christa said, that there's also a lot of really good successes out there.
Yeah, maybe one of the ways because listen, we have also seen budgets spend on AI without successful integration to other like technology, which creates data and reporting issues. We've seen AI deployed where the goal was some sort of self-service, which actually created, like I mentioned a minute ago, more calls coming in because of problems with the deployment. So one of the ways to look at that might be what do you want to avoid, right? Like what is creating the challenges? And I think it's a lot of the opposite things that we're trying to address in our AI readiness, right? It's situations where there's not a clear use case or business process goal. There's no ROI data or measurable component going into it. We're just spending money on AI to spend money on AI. There's no forethought into knowledge management and security issues around that, right? I mean, anytime these types of mistakes are being made, you're going to have a problem in having an optimized AI deployment, right? And so we're trying to help organizations avoid that. It's not like one solution is always the problem or one technology platform is the problem. It's really, I think, resolving the problems by how you're approaching the entire selection and deployment and usage of the tech.
Yeah, I can say from a technology side, I've seen a couple of scenarios where there's been a lot of great work on the front end, but they didn't really look at the data that they had and how it was. So when they went to actually answer these questions, they didn't have the data in the proper way to actually ingest it into the models, which then put a huge delay in the project and a really missed expectation.
Well, we've talked a lot about that, Evan. Is it's what's the right data, and the reason why the contact center is kind of the tip of the spear is because we've got all this structured and unstructured data that's ingestible. But what is the right one out of the million calls? What is the right one to actually utilize to train the model? And not a lot of people are thinking to that. To that level of, what is actually good data. And not many companies are actually doing anything about it. So,
yeah, that's it.
Listen, I love this topic because I did this experiment once when I was speaking at an event and there were probably 100 people in the room and I asked them to stand up. How many of you believe you have all the right data to run your customer experience and contact center as fabulously as you can? And 70% of the people stood up in that room. And when I started calling out specific data points, one by one, they started sitting down. The reality of what we see is about 30% of our clients are looking at the right data from an operational efficiency and customer experience perspective. So it's not, not only what data, do they have it? The integrity of the data we find often leaves much to be desired. And so if you really want to run your business on data-driven solutioning and use cases and measurable performance improvement, you got to start with the right data set, to Fred's point.
Yeah, or it's hard to get at. Like, oh yeah, we have knowledge management. It's up on some SharePoint somewhere. Well,
Yeah.
when's the last time you looked at it? How do you get it? Oh no, okay, well, we don't really actually have it. Okay, let's get rid of it. And so press by. Oh, then we'll just use calls because we have thousands and hundreds of thousands. Okay, well, which calls? How are you going to know which ones are good and bad? You know, so it turns into a nice little hoopla. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, who is this AI readiness service designed for, and what will they get out of it?
Yeah, so it's designed for pretty much any level. I mean, the reason we did this, yeah, obviously there's a certain point where you need a certain amount of data and volume. But you know, as a small to mid-sized contact center practice that's still complex, you know, enterprise I'm not finding the words, Christa, help me out. You know, that's a little more complex in their workflows. You know, still is needing to take that step forward. Does that make sense? Along with the enterprise, I mean, all the way up to clearly the enterprise needs it. But quite frankly, most of the people in the Fortune 500 have teams of developers, but they even at that, they're internal focused. So a lot of times they can't see the forest from within the trees. There's a reason why Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 hire consulting firms consistently, is because they're oftentimes stuck in the quagmire of their enterprise and can't step back and really see it holistically. So it really does fit for just about anybody. There are certain sizes though that I'd say, you know, probably would be it would probably be a bit of overkill at a certain small size, right? But Christa, I'd love to hear your opinion on that too.
I'm going to say everybody, Fred.
Everybody.
I'm going to say everybody needs this. Listen, at the end of the day, we have tried to price the overall assessment, the smaller scope, literally, so it would be accessible for anybody on this journey. But I think, to Fred's point, often what we find on the enterprise end is there's bigger budgets, more resources to go out and navigate all of this than most of our mid-tier clients. But those IT departments are also often very siloed. And so when you're integrating AI into the contact center, you're integrating AI into a whole different set of data and systems and telephony. And so I think often can benefit even the Fortune 500 companies to bring in that contact center CX expertise. But I've been at conferences this spring. I've seen both of these two lovely gentlemen and partners there. Every other booth is AI. It is a nightmare to navigate this. So I think having a guide, a guru, a Sherpa on the way, no matter who you are, is probably advisable.
I like it.
You answered one of my questions, which was, what is a piece of advice you give to companies considering AI adoption? So you already answered the question.
And AI is Sherpa.
Yeah, it's a good answer, because I think to get into it blindly is a mistake, obviously.
Yeah.
So I do like that. My last question for you guys then is, are we closer to full automation?
Are we closer to full automation? Do you guys mind if I take a stab at this one?
Go for it.
Sure.
I think we are both closer and further away than we've ever been. And the reason why I say that is a couple of things. The technology today, especially with, AI orchestration tools, now agentic, which that's something that the whole market is confusing completely. But with all these tools, we have the ability to automate a lot, a whole lot. Now whether it's the right thing or not, that's a different conversation. Whether we're doing it in the proper care to ensure that the customer experience is what they expect, and we're delivering correct answers at the right time. So where we're at today, I'd say we're probably capable of, realistically, with the right teams, deployments, and all the caveats that I could put on, you could probably automate somewhere around a 50% reduction if you really put a lot of effort and cost to serve the client. But we don't know that for sure because the costing is also changing. Everybody keeps saying the LLMs are, the cost of tokens are going to zero. Well, that's great. But what about the developers? What about the, all the tool sets you have to add around it? What we used to think that, because you had a handful of technologies, it was really hard to deploy everything inside a contact center appropriately. We now have hundreds of different solutions. I mean, we have, I shouldn't say, we've got 50 different categories, of different kinds of solutions. And AI continues to bring in a lot of noise and a lot of clutter. So I would say we're a lot closer, but I don't believe we'll ever be in full automation. I think at peak, most companies will never get much past 60 to 70% because most companies still have to serve clients. They'll want to talk to a human, and there will always be a reason to have it. I just think the nature of that will change. The agents will be much higher EQ, and be more focused on the real experience once a client escalates to that point. But I'm also very opinionated on this, so I'd love to hear the other two's thoughts.
Yeah, from a technology perspective, I think we're getting closer every day, right? And I respect what Fred's saying is that the nature of the beast is going to get, exponentially more difficult as we move forward. So the way I look at it today is that we're taking care of the mundane, the easier stuff, right? And really focusing more on personality, the type of relationship you want to have your AI with your customers. And at least I advocate for a lot of transparency, saying this is your digital agent versus trying to be a fake human, right? And so I think, but frankly, the stuff I've seen today, I wasn't even talking about 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago, let alone 6 months ago, right? And what's going to be there in 2 months is probably going to be exponentially better. It's going so fast right now. I think what we were talking about before of aligning expectations, the need to understand and align that is all the more important because the promise from the technologist in me to see that automation is there, right?
And I'm going to say I'm old and I've heard that we're going to automate everything 100 times in my life. And so I'm cautiously optimistic. Listen, yes, it's going to happen. I will validate, as Fred indicated, we have had clients that we have seen hit a 40 to 50% labor cut with good, I'm going to call it good technology strategy in AI, because those are clients that are working in IT strategy and a roadmap for a couple of years, getting there, not plug and playing something off the shelf and hoping for it in a 90-day window. So it's happening. It will continue to happen. I think I'm maybe more on the people side, wondering if the consumer is as ready for all of that, no matter how advanced the technology is getting. There continues to be all kinds of indicators. People still want to talk to people, and maybe, thank God, in the world today, we still want that, right? So, yeah, we're going to see huge shifts, huge changes. There are absolute applications and business models today where you could probably fully automate it now. That will continue to grow. I don't think it's just the tech that's going to set the pace on that.
Yeah, it's going to continue to develop towards the things that we actively, like Christa said, there are some things that you can absolutely automate. Moving files, documents, automating data movement in the background. A lot of the stuff, and this is a piece that a lot of people miss. A lot of the stuff that the agent does on the back end is not necessary anymore. It's just, and even from HR and accounting, I mean, I talked to an accounting person about how many invoices they get and how to categorize them and what to do with them and, all the processes that they have to take place. That's outside of our space, right? I mean, all that stuff is automatable now. And I think we're still going to continue to see a lot of this technology that really perform well when it's agent facing, and taking the easy stuff on the customer. I still don't know that we don't have the government side, of the actual regulations. We've got a couple of states where you have to tell the customer that they're talking to an AI bot. Sooner or later we'll get at a national level. It has to happen, right? We don't know. A lot of times, I would say that customers don't really understand how to dive into the back of the architecture and ask the hard questions like, do I own my data once you put it out? Where is it going? Are you using public keys, or are you building my own private large language model? What is the compliance to that? And I've talked to, there's still a lot of people that will not deploy anything customer facing. They'll do it internally. But they will not deploy anything customer facing because they just don't trust that the security and compliance is all there in these tools. So we've still got a lot of questions to answer. We act like we're 20 years in this, and we're, November 22, really kicked this into acceleration. And so it's, May of 25. We're still really early in this game, but it is, I would say, Evan's point, this stuff, every day it moves faster, and the models, are just exponentially improving. The chipsets are exponentially improving. Everything, based on the current growth. What we'll see a couple years from now is probably a couple 100,000 times better than what we already have. But it's always that last bit, right? It's always that last, you can get, when we used to do voice analytics, 85% accuracy was about where you could peak. Now these models, we're up to that 95, but every 1% incrementally to get to that 99 point, the 5 nines, every point, and then eventually every 0.1 of that point will become exponentially harder. So we live in interesting times. I love it. It's super exciting, but I still think we have a lot to figure out before we can answer that question of, are we to full automation?
Absolutely.
Jessica, you often say, and we talk about the fact that the contact center just isn't a support center or service center anymore. It's like a CX engine.
Yes.
Right. And when you think about, like, in this space, it was telemarketing, then it was a call center, then it was a contact center, because we got Omni, which a lot of our clients are still figuring out Omni, are still figuring out digital, and are still figuring out self-service. So if you haven't figured all that out, what are you AIing? That goes back to the strategy, the process. But I think it's interesting because, again, having been around this space for too many decades, had the idea of AI came out before the concept of customer experience, it probably would be deployed even more rapidly and haphazardly, because it was all deflection and it was all P&L. Like, web chat came out not because it was a nice option to offer somebody, it was cheaper. It was cheaper to have an agent do 3 web chats than it was one voice, right? But customer experience, which impacts our clients' top line revenue, loyalty, retention, right, is impacted negatively often, or can be, when we force people into a channel or a process. This is consumer choice, right? That's what it's about. And so I think, now that AI has to be applied to consumers' liking and to consumer choice, that's probably the people side, right? That slows down a little bit more of how fast the tech itself could actually do the task. So I think we have a different lens when we talk about customer experience, which, again, we didn't even really talk about 10 years ago. And you apply that to technology versus just what can it do operationally and cost cutting, right?
Right.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I thought this discussion was great. Reach out to any of these three if you need your AI readiness assessment. Thank you so much for watching.
Mm.